Hey, it's State of State. We got your Nittany Lion update. It's a football discussion with Tom and Justin, so kick back and press play.
With former Penn State and NFL defensive back Justin King, I'm Tom Hannafin. This is State of State. This podcast is presented by BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything, football, the NBA, college basketball, the NHL, the UFC, and other MMA events. Head to betonline.ag today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. State of State is presented by BetOnline. The game starts here. State of State is proud to partner with Illumination Brewing for another season of crafting State IPA, the perfect tailgate and game day beer for Penn State football fans. State IPA is available now, but it won't last much longer. Check in with your local beer distributor, grocery store, plus select bars and restaurants. Visit illuminationbrewing.com/beer/state-IPA to learn more. Must be 21 years or older to purchase. Please drink responsibly. Also, State of State is a proud supporter of Blue White Outfitters. Blue White Outfitters was created as a retail shop meant to highlight the confidence, competitiveness, and fearlessness of the elite athletes found throughout the history of Penn State University. Check out their Lockdown U and Lawn Boys merchandise today. All sales from Blue White Outfitters directly benefit Penn State student athletes. Also, official State of State merchandise is available now. Support the show and grab State of State t-shirts, hoodies, hats, and more. Visit www.bluewhiteoutfitters.com today.
This was that type of game that I couldn't wait for it to be over so I could start drinking. In one way, either the game would end in a loss or Penn State would win. Fortunately, Penn State did beat Minnesota on the road by a score of 26-25. What the hell was that?
That's got to be the escapee, right? The one that we tried to give away, but we got out of there. So again, the ultimate goal is win and move on. But there's some stuff that got to definitely clean up. Like when you look at that type of performance, I mean, playing away in Minnesota, I guess it's cold up there. I'm not trying to look for any excuses, but it's just like weren't doing anything particularly well, right? Like, I mean, Tyler Warren, he's the bell cow of the team and shows up when he needs to show up, but outside of that, just signing some careless sacks, like not really getting much pressure, couldn't really stop the run. They couldn't run the ball, couldn't move the guys. I mean, I guess we did when we needed to with the tush push at the end and all that good stuff, but it was just kind of overall, it seemed like a lackluster performance. But we'll get out with a W.
Yeah, it's, the old adage, it's hard to win. It's hard to win on the road. It's hard to win in the Big Ten. It's always hard to win. That's all that stuff. But this doesn't inspire much confidence beyond the regular season. It just doesn't. There's plenty of teams that there was some turnover, obviously, within the top 10. I think Ole Miss went down. Obviously, Indiana lost to Ohio State. So this won't affect Penn State's positioning. Texas had a narrow one against Kentucky. So it's like, yeah, Penn State's going to probably be in the exact same spot it's in right now. And it's just like, it doesn't make you feel confident that they could even clear the first round of the college football playoff. And you still got to deal with Maryland next week. But I'll say this. Thank God for the way that Drew Aller played, and thank God for the way that Tyler Warren played. I don't think this fan base properly appreciates Drew Aller. Drew Aller has changed so much in personality and performance from last year. You can look at his stats all you want and say 21 of 28, 244, 1 touchdown, no interceptions, which is just fantastic. 9 carries for 8 yards and that rushing touchdown, which was a statement drive by him at the end of the second quarter, if I remember correctly, where he just decided we're going down the field. He threw that seam route, and that was Warren literally chest to chest with the corner, and he just put it on his back shoulder, and Warren caught it somehow. It was unbelievable. And Drew just decided this is going down the field. There are so many of those instances where Tyler Warren was just effective and like waves on a beach eroding this Minnesota defense. But like Kaytron Allen doesn't get a touch until 10 minutes into the third quarter. The secondary, no disrespect to Lockdown You and the boys that I know you care so deeply about. That was the worst game I've seen Penn State's secondary play this year. Defensively, tackling was poor, positioning was poor. I was texting you at one point during the game. I was like, did we get caught in a lot of zone? Because it seemed like from a passing game standpoint, Minnesota was having a field day.
Well, you look at the numbers, right? 15 for 23, 175 touchdown and INT. I guess there was some conversions in there that were pretty sufficient. But yeah, Daniel Jackson got off for 6 for 90 yards. I mean, the one guy had his catch for 21.
God, those numbers seem low the way it felt.
I think it was the aesthetic of the game wasn't very pleasing. So when anything did happen, it was like, I think it was more highlighted. Not that they played their best game, but again, I just thought it was leaky all over the place, right? Like, I mean, whether it was like some of the run game, like explosive from there, having, like you said, I think there were some passes caught within zones. But it's hard to watch when you don't have like that level of explosiveness, like on call, right? And I think that's what we see when you slow us down a little bit or get us to get into methodical gameplay or play calls. It's like it teeters, right? Like, and that's just kind of what we saw today. And obviously, I mean, I'm a DB, so I'm going to always defend defensive backs to some extent, but it's just like, that wasn't even a glaring thing. There were some passes that were caught, but that didn't seem like this is the worst thing ever. It was like an overall performance for me.
It reminded me of that first half against Bowling Green. And yeah, I think that's the best way I can put it, because the Ohio State game, you did get beat in the secondary, but not consistently. It was just at the opportune times, I guess is the best way to put it.
We talk about spot plays, right? Like guys making plays and things of that nature. It's just like, like the leading receiver is 6 for 90. I mean,
it's a good day.
Yeah, I mean, that's solid. I mean, it was like the quarterback. He went 15 for 23, 175, a touchdown and interception. Like, when you're looking at a secondary, I don't know what else you like ask for. I think you get kind of spoiled when it's like, 100 yards here, 100 yards there.
Well,
it's the lack, but I guess what I'm saying is the lack of explosiveness. Like if we're scoring at a clip, like those things don't look that way. When we can't score, a lot of onus is put on our defense. And like that's, I mean, historically kind of the case with Penn State. And it's just like, all right, that's cool. We scored 26 points, but it was like 26-25 against the Minnesota team there. I don't know, maybe the lack of explosives, I guess, for me, highlight everything else. Like,
no, you're completely right. You have the special teams woes, the block punt, the block field goal, which gets block PAT, which gets returned all the way for 2 points. So all of a sudden, you felt like you had momentum there. I was talking about the drive that Drew Aller put together with the offense, and then it's just like, yep, well, that's out the window. So the explosives. This was the whole conversation during the offseason, getting rid of Mike Yurcich, bringing in Andy Kotelnicki. I'm not condemning what Kotelnicki is capable of. When he's in rhythm as a play caller, it's there. It's fun to watch, and you could see that come back to life in the second half. But when this team needs a conversion and they're struggling, Penn State was 1 of 11 on third down today.
That's not good.
So what are you going to do if you draw Georgia in the first round, which basically took Texas's face and smashed it into the dirt for 4 quarters in Austin? Like the gimmicks, this can be a gimmicky offense. And I don't mean that in the best way. I mean that like when Penn State is rolling, it's vanilla, 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 gimmick, vanilla, 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 gimmick. But then when there's pressure and it's like, okay, got to have it. You go to the gimmicks and it's like, hey, they're playing assignment ball. They're sniffing that stuff out. They're not in rhythm. You're not throwing them off or anything like that. There is no explosivity. I haven't seen explosivity really since like early October with this offense. And again, you have to think about the level of competition you were playing during that time.
Yeah. I mean, you're calling out some pretty fundamental things in the sense of the lack of production. I mean, I guess you say Nick Singleton, we had 13 carries for 63 yards. Tyler Warren, 8 for 102. It's like trying to look at the numbers to cross-reference how it felt, like even them going 5 for 12 on third down efficiency. It felt like they were more efficient on third downs, but it's like all 5 of those catches were probably the off
The
out
one
of the
guy
conversions
Jackson,
were like, yeah, like the ones that we kind of that stick out. You just kind of see like what is the key thing. I mean, yeah, a couple penalties, like they played like that. That's the scary part. Is they seem to play a pretty clean game, and the eye test didn't check out.
the Penn State got gifted that one penalty. I mentioned the drive hour helped put together there to close out the second quarter. The ball that went sailing out of bounds, I think, was intended for Harrison Wallace. They threw a penalty.
Yeah, that wasn't a pass.
I don't know why, but that went in Penn State's favor and helped them with the drive.
Yeah, I mean, I got probably keying that ref's car outside.
I don't know. It was you know what it was like. I always look for body language, and Drew Aller seemed pissed this entire game. Not in a good way.
I don't even know if efficient is the right word. It just wasn't smooth. It wasn't like
Sharp.
aesthetically pleasing. It wasn't sharp, right? Like when you have that from a fan's perspective or even from an opposite's perspective, like that does mess up the flow of the game and keeps a team like Minnesota, who should not have been in the game like this, down to the wire. But like again, the context is them being away and Minnesota playing at home. But even then, yeah, it makes you wonder what that looks like in the playoffs against teams that just have more talent and aren't going to really beg the partons, or if you can't have explosive and score right now, because I don't think Minnesota just had the personnel to do anything that made the gap unbearable for us to close. So the eye test was probably the worst thing of this whole situation. I'm looking at the numbers and it's not glaring, but it's just not dominant anywhere, right? Like, and I think that's what we're probably feeling or talking about when we think of being a 4 seed going into the playoffs, first round, playing someone like a Georgia or whoever it might be, and having those what ifs. But you win them, keep it moving.
And you get Maryland next week at home. Maryland, not sure what they're doing right this second, but
they were losing the last time I watched. Yeah. They were losing.
So it's an inconsistent Maryland team. They'll have something to play for, trying to play, spoiler there at the end of the year, and that's always a personal rivalry. Here's the thing for me is that ever since the Ohio State loss, I was like, just win out, which is not an easy thing to ask, but still win out, and then try and get away unscathed. Anthony Donko, your starting right tackle, gets carted off in the first quarter with what looked like a right knee injury. Nolan Rucci came in. Nolan Rucci, the transfer from Wisconsin, seemed like he played a decent game. I'd have to really watch back the entirety of the game. There's so much crap happening in this game. It's just, you have to watch this multiple times to understand it. Alonzo Ford at D tackle gets banged up. Luckily, he's a little bit lower on the depth chart, but they want to be able to use him more. Tyrese Mills, second game in a row, he gets banged up in and out of the game. Bega Ioane got banged up, came back in. Dennis Sutton banged up, came back in. It's November. And you've been there. It's November. These things are going to happen, but you're just praying to God you can get through Maryland and then have a couple weeks to sit potentially for the playoff on what is that, Saturday the 21st, and be okay and have your depth at the. I can't even talk. I just it was such an annoying game. It was so annoying. I was like,
it was
end.
It was an annoying game. It was an annoying game to watch, just in the sense of. Yeah, just a lack of execution, and I guess the lack of execution, I guess, to the expectation of what Minnesota was. Right, they were a well coached team. They were making plays again at home. Took their best shot. It's just, yeah, you just see kind of the limits that we have as a football team. Like, and like you said, you brought up that gimmicky perspective on the offense, and now that you said that, it's hard for me to unsee it, because it's like, is it super gimmicky, or is it, or is that just kind of the wrinkle that comes within that tree trunk that we talked about at the beginning of the year when we were putting a whole bunch of things out on the field? And I'm not sure, but it starts to feel a little gimmicky when you don't stick to that one identity.
I'll put it this way. Georgia is the comparison I like to make because they've dominated the sport for the last 5 years. Does Georgia do anything gimmicky? No. That offense is vanilla as vanilla gets. It's play action, run the ball. They use their tight ends more than Penn State does. You more tight ends than Penn State does. It's a vanilla, old school style of offense. It's a pro style offense. Like, and I mean not the current pro model, but the pro model you're seeing like the mid 2000s, 2010s, somewhere in there.
Right.
But they have better personnel. Penn State has better personnel than Minnesota, but when you're trying to run gimmicks, you're trying to accentuate okay personnel. And you have an outstanding quarterback, better than I think people truly understand in Drew Aller. Like, we are so freaking lucky that he's the starting quarterback right now. And what kills me, Justin, is that his full potential won't be realized at Penn State. I'm not saying he's transferring. I'm saying it won't be realized while he's in college.
That sucks. That does suck, because like it happens for a lot of college players, but especially at that quarterback position, where you see a player leave and get like the ample coaching or say the stability from that position, coach or whatever that looks like, and them excel. And it's like, hey, what happened in college or what happened here? And you have to go back and dissect it, because he does have all the tools that it takes to be successful. I mean, he was a major reason we won today, right? Like you said, being able to evade the pass for us, putting the ball in his playmaker's hands when he needed to. Again, and kudos to him on just his mobility in the offseason, because like he's a completely different player in the pocket than he was last year. And like you said, he can make every single throw. Like he made a beautiful pass. Was that like second or third quarter? I forget when it was, but that was one of the few.
Touchdown pass to Amari was outstanding.
Yeah, that one was beautiful. And it's just like, man, like, why can't we get him in rhythm with this like the whole time, just kind of slinging around? It starts to beg the different, not to put the spotlight back on the receivers, but it's just like, is this just kind of the TV copy of us not seeing him, not having anywhere to throw, or the coaches not being able to game plan different mismatches on the outside, trying to run, and it's just like trying to attack weaknesses, but you're now trying to protect your own weaknesses. That's when you have a problem in an offensive attack.
And there was the challenge of the way Minnesota plays defense. Hats off to them. They got after Drew. They made him uncomfortable there in the first half, especially. The offensive line didn't have a great half. And I mentioned Donko going down. That's a factor certainly to consider. At wide receiver, there's no one that scares anybody, unfortunately, in the Big Ten. Harrison Wallace had himself, what was the total? 4 catches for 46 yards. Amari Evans, 2 for 51 and a touchdown. Could have had a third there, but it was just Drew was thrown off his back foot and could have had a second touchdown, as a matter of fact. Clifford, 1 catch for 8 yards. Did Julian Fleming even step on the field today?
I didn't see him. I mean, maybe he was blocking, but I didn't actually see like a pass play or anything like that. Just been a minimal threat to the outside. So I mean, it's kind of what he is. But yeah. I mean, again, that playmaker gene is still needed on the offense.
Yeah. I don't even know where to begin with this, and it's just I feel like we did begin with it, but I'm sitting here, and it's like you were 3 of 4 on 4th down, meaning you had to go for a lot of situations where it makes me uncomfortable as a fan, because now for 11 years I've seen James Franklin mismanage 1-possession games, and when you walk out onto that ledge, that's where Penn State gets really, really shaky, and it's like, all right, you almost blew it. You almost blew a chance at the college football playoff here at Minnesota. That's hats off to Minnesota. That's a better team than I expected Penn State to run into, and I think they have a bright future ahead of them. Brosmer played himself a good game, minus the interception, but I was like, good.
I said it earlier in the week. I was like, they're a well-coached team that can show up, and you're going to have to be ready to fight and not get down too far. And I think they came out and kind of stuck it to Penn State. You know, it's just it's a personnel mismatch is why we won, but you know, again, we're speaking from the standpoint of like, what does this look like for the playoffs? Because today is just like, from the aesthetic standpoint, it wasn't the greatest. Looking at the numbers, nothing jumping off, but I hate to be like that guy. It's like, yeah, we need just more explosives.
No, but you're right. And I look at it this way, you know, Ohio State beat Indiana soundly.
Mm-hmm.
Once Ohio State had its second possession of the entire game was over. The scoreboard, you can look at it if you want, but watch that game. That first opening possession, Indiana gets a score, Ohio State, and then they get it back. Game's over after that.
It was over. It felt like it was over. Like they didn't have a chance to move the ball. They couldn't like do much. It was a stranglehold.
So Penn State, you were within 1 possession of potentially taking a lead against Ohio State. I've said it, without the pick 6, Penn State probably lose that game 27-6 at home, but still it's like, all right, you can walk away with what actually happened. Say we were within a possession of the team that's just right there.
Right.
And your best win is against Illinois, who was ranked number 19. They just barely beat Rutgers today on the last play of the game. Thank you to Bryant, the wide receiver for Illinois, for keeping Penn State's resume looking as it does. I'm not going to say as good as it does, because it's like, yeah, this is, your resume is flimsy and you have to beat Maryland. I don't think that's a shock to anybody. That's just the truth of the matter. You have to beat Maryland to get into the college football playoff. And then honestly, it's like, you're going to run into teams like I went through it with Rhett Lewis later on earlier this week on Believe in Big Ten, another podcast within the Believe Podcast Network. And I was talking about how I was like, yeah, every team in the top 12 looked like they could beat every other team in the top 12. And then you have to look at Penn State versus all those teams. It was like, okay, now you're asking the question. I was like, can they actually beat these teams?
Right. Right. I mean, that's the thing that you got to ask yourself. Yeah, I don't think there's a team that looks like they can't be beat, to be completely honest. Like, that's the fun part. But I always like to say, you know, the style makes the fight and the matchups and things like that. So keep winning. Let's see who we match up with in the playoffs. That's all I can say.
The parody is fun. Today was not fun.
Today was not fun.
Penn State escapes Minneapolis. Penn State beats Minnesota by a score of 26-55. They will round out the season this coming weekend against Maryland. Got to get the job done. Like, comment, subscribe, rate us, turn on notifications, get at us on social media at State of State Pod. Get in our comment section on YouTube. And if you haven't done so already, you can become a member of our YouTube channel. For just 99 cents a month, you can get all upcoming episodes of State of State plus our entire members-only playlist, ad-free, commercial-free. Hit the join button on our homepage or follow the link in the description of this podcast. As James Franklin likes to say, we're going to flush this game tomorrow. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you all so much for joining us. This episode and our entire library of shows is available now on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Also, let us know what you think of the show on social media and check out all of our content on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Search for the handle at State of State Pod. State of State is presented by Bet Online and by Blue White Outfitters.